Chapter 1247. Where was Wang Yuetong now? The Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace were eager to know the answer to this question. Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian also wanted to know the answer now. But it was just a thought. Compared with Li Tianlan and Wang Xingxiao, who tried to find a needle in a haystack regardless of manpower, material and financial resources, Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian knew the result from the beginning. It was impossible to find her. Even if Zhongzhou State, no, even billions of people in the world were placed in front of Li Tianlan and asked him to look at them one by one, Li Tianlan could not find Wang Yuetong. When she left Beihai alone, no one could understand the sadness and grievance in Wang Yuetong's heart. She could not stand in the position of her family to be Li Tianlan's enemy. She could not stand on Li Tianlan's side against the family that gave birth to her and raised her. The moment Li Tianlan set foot in Beihai, Wang Yuetong herself had become a joke of the Wang family of Beihai. The Wang family of Beihai had reasons not to compromise. Li Tianlan also had personal affairs that he could not let go. Wang Yuetong was caught in the middle. The two sides that squeezed her might have more or less considered her existence, but in the end, they did not compromise. Because they could not let go and could not retreat. So on Mount Dibing that year, Li Tianlan's sword directly pierced Wang Yuetong's heart. At that moment, the reality was so naked and bloody in front of Wang Yuetong. There were some things that she really could not change or escape. She was caught in the middle and could only be in a dilemma. So she used her body and even her life to face Li Tianlan's edge. Death was death. She was not afraid of death. Why would she care about love and family? She did not care about her own dilemma. She just intended to destroy everything she had in exchange for Li Tianlan and Mount Dibing not to be in a dilemma. After that sword, Emperor Dong sweeping across Beihai completely came to an end. It was like an incomparably grand farce. Silver moon sky light town Beihai. But after that sword, Li Tianlan did not kill her in the end. The fact was undeniable. If it were not for Wang Yuetong, no one could be sure what the whole Mount Dibing, all the elites, all the forces, and all the foundations would be tormented by Li Tianlan, who was full of killing intent at that time. No matter what it was, at least it wouldn't be like 2 years ago when they finally gave up. Li Tianlan finally took a step back. In Wang Yuetong's mind, all the affection, love, promise, and future between her and Li Tianlan were completely shattered when Li Tianlan took a step back. There was nothing left, not even a drop. Although the Wang family of Beihai suffered heavy losses and lost face, at least because of Li Tianlan's retreat, its foundation was preserved. This was what Wang Yuetong had protected at all costs. It was also because of this desperate action that Wang Yuetong thought she had done everything she could and repaid the Wang family of Beihai for raising her. What else could he do after that? Those who should be opposing each other were still opposing each other. If he stayed, would he continue to make things difficult for both parties and himself? That sword strike broke the relationship between her and Li Tianlan, as well as the cause and effect between her and the Wang family of Beihai. So when she left Mount Dibing, her mood should be very complicated. There was reluctance, sadness, and regret. But it should also be very resolute. He didn't put himself, Li Tianlan, or Beihai in a difficult position. No one knew whether she was calm or relaxed. But in this situation, Xianyuan Wushang was sure that Wang Yuetong really wanted to hide. We can't find her. Xing Tian said with certainty. Yes, we can't find her. Xianyuan Wushang sighed and suddenly smiled. It's unrealistic to find Yuetong directly, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a direction. It was still possible to find Wang Yuetong before he and Xing Tian arrived, with the power of the Wang family of Beihai and Emperor Dong's palace. But after they came here, this possibility was basically a theoretical possibility. Perhaps from the first second they arrived here, some people's eyes had fallen on Wang Yuetong and her daughter. Princess Royal of the Time Corridor. A peak expert who cheated authority. Xianyuan Wushang had confirmed that Princess Royal was now with Wang Yuetong's daughter. This was not a rumor, but a fact told to him by Princess Royal herself. Wang Yuetong really wanted to hide. Once Princess Royal confirmed her mother's thoughts, would others still want to find her? It was simply a fool's talk. What did a peak expert who cheated authority mean? It meant that even if Wang Yuetong stood in front of Li Tianlan now, he could not see her. If Princess Royal wanted to, she could make the whole world completely forget that Wang Yuetong had ever existed. All traces of her existence would disappear, and everyone's memory of her would fade away. It was an unbridled deception, and it was flawless. Under the shroud of the Princess Royal's will, not to mention the fact that he had already been killed. Suppressed by the real environment, Xianyuan Wushang could hardly find Wang Yuetong even at his peak. But we can try to get the eldest princess to come find us. Xianyuan Wushang smiled honestly. Xing Tian's massive body shuddered involuntarily. When King Wei obtained a portion of the heart-shattering sword intent, we were able to confirm that the energy of the heart-shattering sword originated from the eastern mountain. Xing Tian said. It's just that we can confirm it. It might not be true. If our perception is deceived, then the energy of the heart-shattering sword may also originate from Star State. But we were deceived, so we were sure that it was in the eastern mountain. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head. It's hard to start from this aspect. And if we want to find Princess Royal, there's no need to play those fancy tricks. It's best to find a way to meet her honestly. Your Highness, don't you have anything that can directly contact Princess Royal? Xing Tian was a little confused. Why do you think I have such a thing? Xianyuan Wushang smiled helplessly. Xing Tian did not speak. Feng Qinggu, Princess Royal of the Time Corridor. Even in the space-time corridor, she was a symbolic existence. The first princess rarely went out and never interfered with anything. Over the course of a long time, she could only be seen in a few battles. Most of the time, she didn't exist in the space-time corridor. Does Princess Royal have any friends? Xing Tian asked. She has no friends. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head slightly. Not even acquaintances. After the ancient war, she admitted that she had committed a grave sin and sealed herself in the imperial palace, which is equivalent to cutting off all contact with the outside world. Then this time, Xing Tian was stunned. Xianyuan Wushang took a deep look at him and did not hide anything. Xing Tian was the logical core of one of his privileges. In other words, Xing Tian was a part of him, so there was naturally no need to be cautious or suspicious. Of course, it's to atone for her sins. The end is coming, so Princess Royal intends to make a key for herself. Xing Tian seemed to understand. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head and said slowly, I'll leave this matter to you. Eastern Mountain is not trustworthy, but the logical starting point is very obvious, and that is the North Sea. You can weave other logics from this starting point. When you really get close to or touch the truth, Princess Royal will naturally notice, and then you can find a way to let her meet us. If she doesn't want to, tell her that there are some problems in the process of His Majesty's return, and she will come. Xing Tian nodded and wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. If you have something to say it. Xianyuan Wushang walked back to his seat, opened a bottle of his favorite Coke, and said without looking up. Princess Royal is with His Majesty's daughter? Xing Tian deliberated over his tone. Xianyuan Wushang looked at Xing Tian and was a little confused. What's the problem? Strictly speaking, Princess Royal is also Big Brother's daughter. So, Xing Tian said softly, has Princess Royal merged with His Majesty's daughter? Or has she replaced her? That won't happen. Xianyuan Wushang laughed. I don't know much about Princess Royal's authority, but generally speaking, she and Big Brother's daughter should be together in one body and two souls. As for what will happen in the final stage, no one can tell. If she wants to be the key, she must do something that she has never done before. But there is a high probability that the two will become two independent individuals, but they can also merge into a whole. The thoughts, memories, and souls between the two are all interconnected. Like Qin Weibai and the Master of Samsara Palace? Xing Tian asked. Pretty much the same. Who can know the specifics? If I knew, I would have chosen fraud authority a long time ago. In terms of this authority, in the whole neutral camp, only this Princess Royal can reach above level 9. 5. Now King of Deception can't do it. Even Big Brother, who had all the authority at the beginning, didn't reach this level. He opened the drawer, took out a document, and looked at it carefully. This was the latest information sent from the laboratory of Emperor Dong's palace. It was recorded 12 hours ago, and it was the latest changes in Dongqing Rushi and Situ Wanjie's body data. Xianyuan Wushang looked at it quietly. He glanced through most of the data, including some data that the experts in the laboratory paid great attention to. What he paid most attention to were the 3 new data that appeared at the bottom of the document. Even the experts in the laboratory didn't know what they represented. Xianyuan Wushang provided Emperor Dong's palace with a special instrument to detect these 3 data. No one knew the specific function of the instrument. Also, no one knew the meaning of the 3 data except Xianyuan Wushang. 3 sets of data. The first represented spiritual strength. The second one represented the activity of thinking. The third represented the deepest level of subconsciousness. Xianyuan Wushang glanced at these 3 vital data and felt a little regretful. It will take about 2 years for this sister-in-law to wake up. Only then can she be more stable in the future. 2 years. It's hard. I'm afraid things can't be suppressed for so long. Tribulation situation is good. He will wake up in half a year. He shook his head. It's more reliable to find Wutong. Why don't you believe in Her Highness Qin Weibai? Maybe, His Majesty won't find anything in the end. Xing Tian tried to make a last-ditch struggle. If possible, he really didn't want to deal with that Princess Royal. Of course, I don't doubt this sister-in-law's means. Xianyuan Wushang said softly, but I don't doubt Jiang Shangyu's IQ. He also knows about this. It depends on when he takes action. Chapter 1248. At 5:00 in the morning, before dawn, Wang Xingxiao had already walked into a breakfast shop on the edge of Xingzhou City. The pace of life in Xingzhou was very slow. Few breakfast shops opened before 7:00 in the morning. If Wang Xingxiao didn't make an appointment in person, this shop with a special Rujiamo sign would usually open at 7:30 in the morning and close at 9:30 in the morning. It only sold 500 Rujiamos a day. Although it was a lot, it was never for money. It was in short supply all year round. Wang Xingxiao ordered 20 Rujiamos and 2 bowls of mutton soup. In the rising steam from the mutton soup, he picked up the Rujiamo and took a bite. The steamed bun was crispy, the meat was tender, and the fat was moderate. It was fragrant but not greasy. It's really... I haven't eaten it for a long time. Wang Xingxiao sighed softly. I've eaten it for so many years since I was a child, but I'm not tired of it. I don't know whether I'm great or Uncle Yuan's cooking is great. Of course I'm great. The middle-aged boss in an apron, who looked to be in his 50s, brought over 2 freshly made Rujiamos and scolded them with a smile. You 2 little rabbits ate here for several months in a row. At first, you could eat 5 at a time, and then you could eat 8 at a time. Not only did you refuse to pay, but you also brought people here to eat and drink for free, including Yuetong, Tang Shi, Song Ci, and even Wang Xiaoyao. Later, I asked your father for money, but he didn't want to pay. I almost fell out with him. Then you have to blame Brother Jiang. He said he was close to you and didn't need to pay. Wang Xingxiao laughed and looked at Di Jiang, who was sitting opposite him, calm and quiet. The middle-aged boss slapped Di Jiang on the back. I haven't seen you for more than 2 years. Where have you been? Is my Rujiamo not delicious anymore, or are you tired of the old? You seem to have changed a lot. Are you pretending to be mature? Cough, cough, cough. Di Jiang was busy drinking mutton soup. There were a lot of chili in the soup, and it tasted ecstatic. The slap made Di Jiang choke and cough, and his delicious face turned red. The boss laughed and got up to fill a small bowl of clear soup. He condensed frost in his hand to cool the soup and handed it to Di Jiang. Drink it quickly. Wang Xingxiao looked at this scene and smiled without saying a word. The boss here was surnamed Yuan, and his first name was Quan. He had been serving Mount Dibing in Beihai since his great-grandfather's generation. In the hearts of the Wang family of Beihai, he could be said to be a true descendant. Yuan Quan's grandfather had been the protector of the Patriarch of Beihai and was also one of the three superiors of the Invincible Realm in that generation of the Wang family of Beihai. After he died of old age, his name was engraved on the stone of formidable person. Yuan Quan's father was one of the several people in charge of the Beihai physics laboratory in the previous generation. In Yuan Quan's generation, he used to be one of the top superiors of Mount Dibing. His strength had reached the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. His code name was Flying Ape. He was famous for his speed and was also well known in the dark world. However, his foundation was seriously injured in a mission more than 10 years ago, and he barely retained the strength of the early stage of the ice-condensing realm. After Yuan Quan was injured, he stayed in Mount Dibing for a few years. He really couldn't stand the loneliness, so he simply brought his family to Xingzhou City and opened a breakfast shop. Now it could be regarded as the signature of the breakfast industry in Xingzhou. The detached villa left to him on Mount Dibing was still there, and now his son basically lived there. He had an excellent relationship with Wang Xingxiao and Dijiang. Even though he left Mount Dibing, in Wang Tianzong's eyes, he was also a confidant. His son, Yuan Shu, graduated from Beihai Military Academy 6 years ago. He had joined the Beihai Corps while he was still in school and was awarded the rank of second lieutenant. After graduation, he soared to the sky. In just 6 years, he was already a lieutenant colonel. After Wang Xingxiao became the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, the Beihai Corps recruited more than 300,000 soldiers in more than 2 years. Yuan Quan's son, Yuan Shu, was one of the main people in charge of this recruitment. It was self-evident what this meant. I just got out, and I haven't even had time to see the light of day again. You almost slapped me back again. Dijiang rolled his eyes and took a big bite of the rujiamo. After more than 2 years in Beihai prison, he really wanted to have a bite of it for a long time. What do you mean by just got out? Did you commit a crime? Yuan Quan grinned. He didn't pay much attention to Mount Dibing now. To cultivate my mind and body. Dijiang smiled. His eyes were deep and satisfied. More than 2 years. I've gained a lot. Tut, Yuan Quan sighed with some regret. I thought you were caught and thrown into Beihai prison by the Nalan family because you failed to rape the little girl of the Nalan family. The little girl of the Nalan family, Dijiang's eyes dimmed slightly. Realizing that he had said something he shouldn't have said, Yuan Quan coughed awkwardly, stood up, and said, "You eat first, I'll continue to cook. I'll add soup and meat. You eat slowly." Wang Xingxiao smiled bitterly. He looked at Dijiang and didn't speak. Dijiang drank the soup in silence. Compared with more than 2 years ago, he didn't seem to have changed much, but he did. More than 2 years ago, no matter how steady he was, he occasionally had the arrogance and high spirits of his youth. Double Thunder Veins entered the Invincible Realm at the age of 36, came from a wealthy family, was the chief student of Sword Emperor, and was handsome. Dijiang did have the capital to be proud and arrogant. Today, 2 years later, he was nearly 40 years old. Some of the situation and spirit in those years had gradually disappeared with these 2 years of imprisonment. Now Dijiang seemed to have completely settled down and was as quiet as an ocean. Wang Xingxiao didn't know what to say. He stirred the mutton soup in front of him in silence. She went to Tiannan, didn't she? Dijiang lowered his head and whispered, "Did she come back?" Wang Xingxiao shook his head with a bitter smile. With her character, although she went to Tiannan, there was basically no news about her. I guess she rarely left the lab. Beihai's silver eyes. Beihai's Nalan Shuriying. When the genius woman with silver eyes was still in the Beihai lab, Dijiang was one of the few people who could take her out of the lab. Dijiang liked her. He had never denied it. Nalan Shuriying, who was so focused and pure that she looked a little cold, never resented getting along with Dijiang. But she just didn't resent it. The relationship between the two had been lukewarm for many years. Maybe they were friends. They were closer. Maybe in her heart, Jianghu was her big brother. But that was all. Now that Nalan Shuriying had gone to the southern heaven region, it meant that if there were no accidents, it would be very difficult for Emperor Jiang to see those enchanting silver eyes in the future. The faintly discernible connection between the two had been completely broken. Jiang ate the rujiamo and suddenly smiled. He asked, "What are you going to do with me?" "What do you think, Brother Jiang?" Wang Xingxiao wisely changed the topic with Jiang. More than 2 years ago, under the pressure of Wang Qinglei and Wang Xiaoyao, Jiang was finally not expelled from Beihai, but he was imprisoned in Beihai prison. The reason? Just because Li Tianlan said something to Jiang at that time. In fact, Li Tianlan just moved his mouth and didn't say anything. This seemingly ridiculous little trick caused great pressure to Jiang in the internal environment of the Wang family of Beihai at that time. It was because Jiang couldn't say what Li Tianlan said at that time. Someone in Beihai wanted to execute him. Or be expelled from Beihai. Temporarily imprisoning him in Beihai prison was the best choice Wang Xingxiao could make under absolute pressure. The past 2 years were definitely not a waste for Jiang. He lived next door to Wang Tianzong. He could feel the sword intent of the Chosen One all the time. The sword intent condensed bit by bit, extremely detailed and clear from the initial chaos. This was equivalent to showing every detail of the 6 paths of reincarnation sword of the Wang family of Beihai in front of Jiang, and what was shown was the essence of Wang Tianzong's swordsmanship. Jiang, before entering Beihai prison, used a saber. The two ideas of using a saber and a sword were completely integrated with him in more than 2 years. His realm, which had just entered the invincible realm, quickly stabilized, and then began to sprint toward the peak of the invincible realm. His martial arts were gradually changing and maturing. It was like a saber but not a saber, like a sword but not a sword. He was proficient in both saber and sword, plus his original double thunder veins. Now his incredible power and his own martial arts were enough to become the real pillar of the Wang family of Beihai. Who was his opponent before entering Beihai prison? The opponent he could compare with at that time was Saint, who entered the invincible realm at about the same time as him, and Dawn of Purgatory of Heaven Capital, who entered the invincible realm at about the same time as him. Now he ranked at the bottom of the divine list. However, the opponent in his heart right now was the Dark Queen Moongaze. It was Wang Xiaoyao, who had confirmed that he had entered the peak of the invincible realm. It was Li Shi, who had entered the peak of the invincible realm for more than 20 years. He was the so-called heavenly imperial guardian, Gu Xingyan. Now Jiang was indeed a little bit away from the real peak of the invincible realm. This gap could be said to be a lot, but it could also be said to be very small. It was so big that an ordinary invincible realm expert could never surpass it, and so small that his dual thunder veins could make up for it. In terms of strength alone, his strength had far surpassed that of the peak of the invincible realm. This was the trump card with which he was confident that he could fight against most of the experts today. How about I go to Tiannan? Jiang asked with a smile. Tiannan can't hold on much longer, can it? He went to the southern heaven. Of course, there would be a place to stay. If Tiannan doesn't work, we can only abandon it. Wang Xingxiao shook his head. The situation over there is not optimistic. It's useless for you to go there. The currently Tianlan was completely different from 2 years ago. Brother Jiang, don't underestimate your enemy. There's a reason why he can climb to the top of the divine list. I fought with him not long ago, and I couldn't find any flaws in him at all. Wang Xingxiao paused and suddenly frowned. I even have a feeling that when he fought with me, he didn't use his strength at all. I don't mean that he didn't take it seriously, but his every move now seems not to consume any physical strength at all. How is that possible? Jiang shook his head with a smile. Maybe it's an illusion. Wang Xingxiao smiled bitterly. But now it's certain that you are no match for him. Maybe you can approach him in strength, but you can't make up for the gap in other aspects. Even if we join hands, we can't. Who said that I will go to Tiannan to fight against Li Tianlan? Jianghu stood up and served himself another bowl of mutton soup. He didn't need to be polite with Yuan Quan, so he directly scooped a spoonful of mutton. If I don't fight against him, how can I see Nalan? Wang Xingxiao said blandly, and if you go to Tiannan, what identity will I give you? After second uncle left Mount Dibbing can't afford any trouble now. Now when you are officially needed, I'm alone and under a lot of pressure. All right. Jianghu thought for a moment, threw mutton oil chili garlic mashed into the soup, and said with a smile, how's the preparation for this election? Not bad. Wang Xingxiao bit the Rujiamo and said with some regret, I was going to enter the election with the help of the conflict between the academy and the new group, so that at least I can swallow some of the benefits of the Flourishing Age Fund. Tang Shi has also been preparing for this these days. But it's a little strange these days. The contradiction between the two sides seems to have eased, although it hasn't completely eased. So when are you going to enter the election? Jianghu asked, wait for an opportunity. I can't afford to wait. Wang Xingxiao said in a deep voice, since there is no opportunity, we can create a breakthrough ourselves and enter the election directly. Where? Jianghu said blandly. Huading. Wang Xingxiao's voice was firm. Jianghu suddenly raised his eyebrows. The Prince Group? Now the leader of Huading was one of the banners of the Prince Group. Attacking Huading naturally meant attacking the Prince Group. Wang Xingxiao sneered. How can it be so easy to take Wuya away? If they dare to reach out, we will naturally fight back. If we can't protect Wuya, we can use Huading to exchange. In this election, it is the core task to let Uncle Wen enter the cabinet, and taking Huading is the strategic goal. Only in this way can we not lose this election. Jianghu was silent. Now the biggest goal of the Wang family of Beihai and the Southeast Group was to not lose. It was impossible to win. The combination of Wang Qinglei and Wang Xiaoyao could not be said to be invincible in the world, but their sudden betrayal did stab the Southeast Group in the heart. It was a pretty good result to be able to stabilize the situation. As long as they could take Huading and promote Wen Siyuan to the top, the Southeast Group would not lose this election. In such a complicated situation, in many cases, as long as they did not lose, they would actually win. What's your specific plan? Jianghu asked. I already have some information here. Wang Xingxiao smiled. It was provided by second uncle. If he wants to protect Huading now, he must pay the price. This information can make a lot of noise in Huading. Information, Jianghu frowned tightly. Only involving the Prince Group? How is that possible? Wang Xingxiao shook his head gently. Huading has always been a mixed bag of good and bad people, and the situation is very chaotic. Once this thing breaks out, it will definitely be investigated. Under the strict investigation, the Giant Group, the North Group, and the academics can't escape. Jianghu took a deep look at him. Just be prepared. The election is getting closer and closer, and the chaos is inevitable. But this time we are the ones to lead. Even if they want to settle accounts with us, they will probably have to wait until after the election. Wang Xingxiao's voice was gentle. Moreover, the focus is not only on Huading. I never believe that Li Tianlan will really behave. He looked at Jianghu and raised the corner of his mouth with a strange smile. The information in my hand will be handed in a few days. When things break out, we will take the initiative to attack. Brother Jiang, you are the vanguard. I plan to let you go to Wuya. What do you think? Chapter 1249. The moment the video was hung up, the picture on the screen paused for a moment and froze for less than a second. The image of Ji Wenzhang narrowing his eyes fell on the other end of the video. Meanwhile, on the screen, Ji Wenzhang also saw the smile of the graceful and majestic female chairman's lips curling upwards. This faint smile had a profound meaning, making it hard for others to decipher it. It was the confidence of victory, the mockery of disdain, and a trace of indifference as if everything was under control. Ji Wenzhang silently took the cigarette case, took out a cigarette, lit it, and smoked it, In his office in the Hidden Dragon Sea, his desk was still close to the window. There was a strong wind in Yuzhou. The howling cold wind blew against the window lattice and made a whining sound. Outside the window, the fallen leaves were falling with the wind, wantonly depicting the harsh winter in the Hidden Dragon Sea. Ji Wenjiang's slightly narrowed eyes were deep, but behind the deep eyes, there was a touch of helplessness and bitterness, as well as anger that was not too obvious but really existed. Bai Qingqian. This Bai Qingqian, the only female speaker at the provincial level in the entire Zhongzhou state, had begun to become more and more tough recently. To some extent, Bai Qingqian was simply unscrupulous now. Everyone knew that she was now one of the leaders of the new group. But after all, the election had not officially begun, which meant that Bai Qingqian could be said to be a member of the new group, but also a member of the giant group. The ambiguity of her identity and position did not put her in a passive position. Given the relationship between Li Tianlan and Dongqing Wudi, ordinary strategies such as sowing discord were useless and would backfire. The relationship between the two remained unchanged, and the new group and the giant group were destined to advance and retreat together. It also meant that Bai Qingqian now had the full support of both the giant group and the new group. Bai Qingqian's strength was completely understandable. Because now Bai Qingqian was very stable, unreasonably stable. After the election, there were 9 directors and more than 20 members of parliament. Anyone could have an accident, but Bai Qingqian was the most stable. After the election, Bai Qingqian properly entered the cabinet and ranked 3rd in the cabinet, second only to the 2 directors, the prime minister and the deputy prime minister. Whether it was real power or influence, she would play an important role in the parliament. The new group was determined to win this position. Li Tianlan climbed to the top of the divine list at this time. Bai Qingqian's current position was almost uncontested except for herself. So now Bai Qingqian was in a state of having no desires at all. Bai Qingqian had criticized Hua Zhengyang. A few days ago, after the giant group expressed its concern about the problems in Liaodong, Bai Qingqian criticized some problems in Tianfu province. The speaker of Liaodong criticized the Tianfu province, which was a hot topic in Zhongzhou state in recent days. Everyone could feel Bai Qingqian's confidence. But it was not over. Ji Wenjiang did not expect that he would be forced into a corner by Bai Qingqian. The Liaodong wandering case had fallen into a stalemate. Ji Wenjiang personally went to Liaodong, but the case suddenly became a stalemate, which was a great irony. After Ji Wenjiang arrived in Liaodong and had a talk with Bai Qingqian, the task force, which had been investigating smoothly in Liaodong, suddenly encountered great resistance. The complexity of the case began to change. Many clues that had been locked down either disappeared or became a trap to mislead the task force. It seemed that the closing of the case was far away. This made the task force have a little doubt about Ji Wenjiang, but it was just a doubt. No one had expressed it yet. Ji Wenjiang naturally would not stay in Liaodong for long. He stayed there for 3 days and talked with Bai Qingqian several times. But Bai Qingqian's voice was very clear: stability, harmony, and unity. Ji Wenjiang could only fly back to Yuzhou. As soon as he came back, the person in charge of the task force began to call Ji Wenjiang to complain, saying that the task force was under unprecedented pressure in Liaodong. It was inevitable that there was some emotion and resentment in his words. No matter what the inside story was, at least the process was obvious. Before Ji Wenjiang went to Liaodong, the task force went smoothly. After Ji Wenjiang talked with Bai Qingqian, the task force began to hit a wall again and again. They were all experienced old inspectors. Naturally, they would not see anything from the surface, but the surface was also a clue. Although they did not suspect anything, at least they were now very curious about what Ji Wenjiang and Bai Qingqian had talked about. This curiosity was caught by Ji Wenjiang. Undoubtedly, Ji Wenjiang was a little annoyed and immediately had a video chat with Bai Qingqian. Bai Qingqian's attitude did not change at all. His attitude was extremely clear. He just wanted stability. Bai Qingqian very strongly expressed that she had the confidence to control Liaodong and hoped that the parliament would believe in her ability. He expressed full support for the work of the task force, but he also expressed that he did not want the task force to be used by people with ulterior motives. Bai Qingxian said that going to Liaodong was just an accident. The general situation in Liaodong was not as bad as she had imagined. She hoped that the parliament could trust Liaodong and the parliament of Liaodong. She hoped that in this sensitive period, the task force would respect the facts when investigating the case, and at the same time, they should know when to stop and not pester endlessly. The task force should be the task force of this case, not a group of fake inspectors with ulterior motives who wanted to see the world in chaos. If the previous words were said to be a strong chairman, then Bai Qingxian's last words were undoubtedly a naked mockery. Ji Wenxiang was so angry that he almost disregarded the consequences and directly talked to Bai Qingxian on the other side of the video chat. But in the end, he restrained his anger and barely found a way out. He said that he hoped that both sides would calm down and talk about it. Then he hung up the video chat. Bai Qingxian's attitude was completely beyond Ji Wenxiang's expectation. It was less than a week after the task force went to Liaodong and he went to Liaodong. But in this week, Bai Qingxian's attitude was completely like that of a different person. What did this mean? This was not only Bai Qingxian's attitude. To some extent, this was the change of the new group and the academics. To be exact, it should be the change between Li Huaqing and Li Tianlan. Did Li Huaqing reveal his trump card? Ji Wenxiang shook his head subconsciously. If this was the situation caused by Li Huaqing revealing his trump card, it could only mean that the effect of this trump card was not very good. Everyone speculated that Li Huaqing had a trump card that could make Li Tianlan directly compromise. But in the current situation, the relationship between the two sides was only a temporary stalemate, far from a reconciliation. But if Li Huaqing did not reveal his trump card, then how on earth did it cause the current situation? The answer was actually very simple. Qin Weibai. According to the summary of intelligence from various aspects, the two forces of the academy and the new group went from tit for tat to a stalemate, all because Qin Weibai returned to Emperor Dong's palace. The first day she returned to Emperor Dong's palace was the first day Ji Wenxiang went to Liaodong, and it was also the first day Bai Qingxian's attitude changed. A cigarette burned out. Ji Wenxiang smiled bitterly and put out his cigarette in the ashtray. Qin Weibai. For the woman who once dominated the Dark World, then dominated the Lin clan, and now began to dominate Emperor Dong's palace, Ji Wenxiang had nothing but fear in his heart. This was an opponent that could give anyone a headache. Moreover, although Zhongzhou State had cooperated with Samsara Palace before, it did not have much contact with Qin Weibai. He had caused a few big commotions, but each time, his methods were different, making it difficult for others to understand him. Facing an opponent that they clearly knew not to be underestimated but did not understand at all, who would dare to act rashly? At the very least, he didn't dare to write an article. But now, with the change of Bai Qingxian's attitude, his position had become extremely awkward. The case in Liaodong had caught everyone's attention. Ever since it broke out, Ji Wenxiang had already received a lot of pleading calls. Some of them were old people who had retired from the academy, some were top vice ministers like Huo Xingyang, and there were also representatives with real power from the academy. Because of Bai Qingxian's tough attitude, Ji Wenxiang could turn these people back, and he didn't even care about falling out with Huo Xingyang. After all, Bai Qingxian was in charge of the supervisory department in any case. But now Bai Qingxian's attitude changed. Ji Wenxiang's situation suddenly became awkward. In recent days, he had been talking about the problem in Liaodong. With such a big problem in front of him, if he didn't say it, he would first lose his boldness as the Minister of Supervisory Department, or even dereliction of duty. When Bai Qingxian was strong, Ji Wenxiang's voice could only make the academy silent. But now Bai Qingxian changed her tone and directly talked about stability. Suddenly, monstrous pressure directly pressed down on Ji Wenxiang. There were no eternal friends or eternal enemies. Huo Xingyang's lack of vision did not mean that he was not broad-minded. Even if Bai Qingxian fell out with him before, as Bai Qingxian's tone changed, the contradiction between them suddenly faded. That was the current situation. It was Bai Qingxian who set off the storm in Liaodong. But when the storm was at its fiercest, Bai Qingxian suddenly stopped playing. Now it was Ji Wenjiang who was desperately investigating the problem in Liaodong. The problem in Liaodong had attracted a lot of attention. It was impossible for Ji Wenjiang to make peace even if he wanted to. He couldn't make peace either. The academics wanted to minimize the problem and handle it internally. Bai Qingxian demanded stability. Ji Wenjiang was desperately investigating Liaodong. What did that mean? No matter what the cause was, things had developed to this extent, which meant that Ji Wenjiang of the Southeast Group was fiercely firing at the academics and the giant group. No one could understand how great the pressure was if they were not the parties involved. Not to mention the process, but only the current result, Ji Wenjiang had been severely cheated by Bai Qingxian. There was no result in Liaodong, so Ji Wenjiang was trapped in Liaodong. The problem in Liaodong was obvious. Ji Wenjiang had no way out, so he had to investigate. But how could he investigate? Bai Qingxian came out in person to stop him. The task force was also in a very passive situation. They couldn't find anything. It was impossible not to investigate. If Ji Wenjiang forcibly withdrew at this time, not only would his prestige be ruined, but the entire Ministry of Supervision and even the Southeast Group would be greatly affected. In the ever-changing situation, there were many intentional and unintentional collisions. In the game where only results mattered, Ji Wenjiang's current situation undoubtedly gave other groups a signal that they could plot against the Ministry of Supervision. The case in Liaodong was destined to be in a stalemate. But this was not a confrontation between the academy and the new group. It was a tacit understanding between the two sides, which was to make Ji Wenjiang temporarily unable to extricate himself from the matter in Liaodong. It was a game between the new group and the academy. The Southeast Group entered the game passively. In such a situation, what Ji Wenjiang feared most was something that was destined to happen. Huading. Chapter 1250. What would happen in Huading? Few people in Jianghu State knew about it now. To be exact, only Wang Xiaoyao and several high-level officials of the Southeast Group knew about the storm brewing in Huading at this time. But Ji Wenjiang had no doubt about the reaction speed of other groups. Once the incident in Huading broke out, everyone would react as soon as possible. Liaodong had now involved a lot of Ji Wenjiang's energy. What he was most afraid of was that the incident in Huading would be exposed at this point in time. But what he was afraid of happened. The chaotic war had begun. Wang Xiaoyao held a bomb in his hand. He would inevitably detonate it at the most appropriate time to create the greatest benefits for him. This bomb was essentially a deal between Wang Xiaoyao and the Southeast Group. Both sides had reached a preliminary intention of cooperation, but it was up to Wang Xiaoyao to detonate the bomb. Ji Wenjiang lit a cigarette again, picked up the phone, and planned to call Wang Xingxiao. Now he could not do much, but at least he had to inform Wang Xingxiao. Today's conversation with Bai Qingxian would probably spread throughout Jianghu State tomorrow. At that time, more pressure would be on him. In any case, he had to let Wang Xingxiao prepare in advance. The confidential phone just pressed 2 buttons. There was a sudden knock on the door. Ji Wenjiang's dialing hand paused slightly, and he looked at his watch. It was nearly 11:00 at night. At this time, if there was nothing special, the secretary would not knock on his door. Come in. Ji Wenjiang put down the phone and said in a low voice. The secretary, who had been with him for nearly 5 years, opened the door and said in a steady voice, Minister Zhang said that he has something very important to report to you. Minister Zhang, there were many departments in the Ministry of Supervision, but at this time, only Zhang Xiaohua was qualified to stand outside his office in the Ministry of Supervision, after him and the first deputy minister. He was Wang Xiaoyao's absolute confidant. At this time, Ji Wenjiang's palm trembled slightly. He had already realized what had happened, but he could not avoid it. He could only nod and slowly said, "Let him in." The secretary nodded and left. Ji Wenjiang took a deep drag on the cigarette. It seemed that he inhaled too quickly and suddenly coughed violently. Zhang Xiaohua, who came over with a folder, was stunned. Before she said anything, Ji Wenjiang coughed and waved his hand, saying reluctantly, "Sit down." He picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. He smiled and said, "I'm old. My body can't take it anymore. Minister, you are very busy every day. You should pay more attention to rest," Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. Ji Wenjiang smiled and didn't say much. He just asked, "What is it?" It was simple and direct, revealing a business-like attitude. Their relationship wasn't like this before. At the very least, it wasn't like this 2 years ago. It had been nearly 6 years since Zhang Xiaohua was transferred to Yuzhou from Huading. He was originally a rising star of the Southeast Group. When he came to Yuzhou from Huading, Ji Wenjiang was quite friendly to him. When Wang Xiaoyao became a trusted subordinate, no one suspected Wang Xiaoyao. Naturally, no one suspected Zhang Xiaohua. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua's life in the Ministry of Supervision was smooth sailing. When he first came to the Ministry of Supervision, he was the deputy minister. Now, he was still the deputy minister. It seemed like nothing had changed, but under Ji Wenjiang's guidance, his status in the ministry had skyrocketed. The difference was like heaven and earth. Now, Zhang Xiaohua could be said to be the third most important person in the Ministry of Supervision. In such a top government office, Ji Wenjiang was a director, and the first deputy minister was a counselor. Zhang Xiaohua, the deputy minister at the level of governor, was now qualified to compete for the position of a counselor. This was inseparable from the support of the entire Southeast Group. But in the first year when the Southeast Group pushed him to this position, he betrayed the Southeast Group with Wang Xiaoyao. Sad? Disappointed? Angry? Maybe he had all these emotions. But Ji Wenjiang never expressed them. Zhang Xiaohua's position in the Ministry of Supervision had been completely stabilized. Ji Wenjiang was about to retire. Although he had his own standpoint, he was unwilling to really fight with Zhang Xiaohua. However, the relationship between the two quickly cooled down. Every time they met, they talked about business. After that, they did what they had to do. Zhang Xiaohua had long been accustomed to Ji Wenjiang's attitude. He bowed his head and sorted out the documents in the folder. Quietly, he showed his ferocious fangs to the old leader who had given him a lot of support. His face was heavy and serious. He said softly, "These are some documents from Huading's Ministry of Supervision. Minister, the problem is very serious. Huading is now secretly investigating, but they have encountered great resistance. Now they are asking us for help. It's here. It's officially here." Zhang Xiaohua's voice was very calm. But Ji Wenjiang clearly smelled the bloody storm behind this calm. He took a deep breath, took the documents handed over by Zhang Xiaohua very solemnly, and quickly browsed through them. Strictly speaking, there were 2 copies of this document. One of them reported that Qin Hui, the office director of Huading's parliament, had provided improper protection to many enterprises in Huading and thus received huge benefits. Obviously, this document was very detailed, and it was reported by many people with real names. The investigation was also very in-depth. The information showed that Qin Hui had 5 mansions in Huading, 2 villas, and 3 luxury apartments with an area of more than 500 square meters. Although his children were studying abroad, when they first came to Huading, they all drove luxury cars and lived a very luxurious life. In addition, Qin Hui also had a large number of shares in more than 20 companies in Huading, 2 of which were even listed companies. Of course, the name of the mansions, luxury cars, and shares were not written in Qin Hui's name, but the names of his relatives. The most outrageous was a company called Xinghua Real Estate. Its 3rd largest shareholder was named Qin Ming, who was only 15 years old this year and was still in junior high school. Not to mention the shares of those companies, as the most prosperous international metropolis in Jianghu state, the housing price in Huading was completely expensive. Just the 5 mansions alone were worth more than 500 million Zhongzhou dollars. 500 million. In the entire Zhongzhou state, except for the governor and deputy governor of Beihai province, how many people could take out 500 million in public? The office director of Huading's parliament. This sounded inconspicuous, but it was a real power. Qin Hui was a legitimate deputy governor, and also one of the 13 councillors of Huading. It could be said that he was the representative of Huading's speaker in Huading to the outside world, and the chief steward of the entire Huading. Comparing this position with this amount of money, it was a shocking impact. Ji Wenjiang glanced at the second document in a hurry. He didn't read the specific content of that document, but he saw the target of the report in the second document. Sun Chenggu. Well, if Qin Hui was the chief steward of Huading's speaker to the outside world, then Sun Chenggu was the chief steward of Huading's speaker to the inside world. He was the speaker's personal secretary. These two documents, these two knives, were completely aimed at the prince group. But what was this? Somewhat confused, Ji Wenjiang looked at Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua's face was calm and collected. Wang Xiaoyao stabbed the prince group in the back. No matter how the situation changed, now one thing was certain. The prince group had become Wang Qinglei's biggest reliance. At this time, Wang Xiaoyao stabbed the prince group in the back. What do you think? Ji Wenjiang suddenly asked while looking at the documents in silence. We still have to investigate it. Zhang Xiaohua said softly. Of course we have to investigate it. Ji Wenjiang forced a smile, and his face was a little pale. Tell me your specific thoughts. Things in Huading may be very complicated. What is said in the documents may not be all. Now is a critical period. It's better to find out the problems in Huading as soon as possible. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I know Chu Jiangqiao very well. He is capable enough, but sometimes he is too meticulous. He is good at stabilizing the situation, but in the face of complex cases, it is inevitable that he will waste some time. Minister, we don't have so much time to waste now, and Chu Jiangqiao has been in Huading for too long. It is inevitable that he will fall into various circles and it will be difficult for him to exert his full strength. Zhang Xiaohua's voice paused, and she looked up at Ji Wenjiang. Ji Wenjiang nodded expressionlessly and said, Go on. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, So my suggestion is that at this time, Chu Jiangqiao should be transferred away from Huading. Jiangqiao is a talent. It is very good to put him in a stable environment and play a deterrent role. I think it is very good to let him go to Wuxia. As for Huading, we need to transfer a tough character who really dares to fight there. Minister, didn't you plan to let Lu Xiangyang go to Wuxia in the meeting a few days ago? It's completely unnecessary. I think it will be bad if Lu Xiangyang goes to Wuxia. Wuxia has been relatively stable in recent years. There may be some small problems, but we should believe in Speaker Qinglei's ability. At this time, I think it is the best choice to let Lu Xiangyang go to Huading. Zhang Xiaohua said slowly. Ji Wenjiang took a deep look at Zhang Xiaohua and instantly understood what she meant. Transfer Chu Jiangqiao out and Lu Xiangyang there. On the surface, it was the southeast group that was attacking the prince group. Of course, this kind of cover-up seemed meaningless. Moreover, he was now involved in the Liaodong case, and the influence he could exert on Huading was relatively limited. Therefore, this case was really in the hands of Wang Xiaoyao. As for how to develop, Lu Xiangyang, who had just arrived, could not beat Wang Xiaoyao. Only Wang Xiaoyao had the final say. And Lu Xiangyang was just a shield pushed out by Wang Xiaoyao. Similarly, with this shield, Wang Xiaoyao could do a lot of things. Once the case in Huading broke out, Wang Xiaoyao, who held the case, would have the bargaining chip with all parties. At that time, not only Wang Xiaoyao, but also Wang Qinglei might occupy a great dominant position, and even have the possibility to get out of this mess. At this time, Wang Xiaoyao released the case in Huading, which was tantamount to single-handedly provoking the chaos that had already begun. Next, it should be time for all the big groups to show their abilities. Chapter 1251. While most people were caught off guard, Huading was in a state of turmoil. Liaodong was still in a stalemate. The flourishing Age Fund was still in a stalemate. Although undercurrents were surging in Jianghu state, it looked calm on the surface. All the major groups seemed to be preparing or not. Therefore, when most people were watching silently, the sudden storm in Huading completely brought the undercurrents under the calm situation of Jianghu state directly to the surface. The Ministry of Supervision received real-name reports from many entrepreneurs in Huading and a large number of people through special channels. They reported that Qin Hui, the director at the bottom of Huading, provided improper protection for many enterprises, participated in unfair competition, and received huge benefits. The real-name reports involving many people had always been investigated. And the list of whistleblowers included several influential entrepreneurs in Huading. The nature of the matter suddenly began to escalate. Ji Wenjiang specially held a plenary meeting of the Ministry of Supervision. As soon as the meeting ended, the special task force of the Ministry of Supervision was established. Zhang Xiaohua, the deputy minister, served as the leader of the task force and personally led the team to Huading to investigate Qin Hui's case. Huading was turbulent. The Ministry of Supervision was also turbulent. In the meeting of the Ministry of Supervision that lasted more than 5 hours, there were countless fierce confrontations, and the forces of all the major groups went all out. Zhang Xiaohua took the position of the task force leader without Ji Wenjiang's support. First, Ji Wenjiang was now trapped in the deep pit of Liaodong. Of course, he still had his own power, but the Liaodong case had not been solved perfectly. Ji Wenjiang himself was somewhat passive. Although he wanted to take the initiative in the Huading case, he had no power to do so. Second, the other major groups were competing too fiercely. The Southeast group had the advantage in a top government like the Ministry of Supervision, but it was absolutely impossible for it to turn this place into its own backyard. Even if it couldn't do it, it would be a taboo. Ji Wenjiang's existence could make the Southeast group have the power to overwhelm other groups in the Ministry of Supervision. But with Ji Wenjiang's failure this time, the Ministry of Supervision suddenly felt like 8 immortals crossing the sea. The Giant Group, the North Group, the Prince Group, the Academics, and the Southeast Group were all competing for the position of the task force. Since the Wang family of Beihai lost Huading more than a decade ago, it had always been the focus of all the major groups, but it had always been a place that no one could take. Therefore, Huading was a mixed bag of good and bad, and all the major groups had the power to infiltrate it. Today, the Prince Group had the upper hand in Huading. But with the outbreak of the case in Huading, the advantage of the Prince Group had been lost. In the current situation, whoever won the position of the task force would have the possibility to lead the storm in Huading. Who would be willing to let go of such an opportunity? Everyone was fighting for it, and neither side was willing to give way. So in the end, even though he didn't support Zhang Xiaohua, Ji Wenjiang still chose him. Zhang Xiaohua, Wang Xiaoyao, Wang Qinglei, and Yu Chuanguang were now close to the Prince Group, but they had not officially entered it. Moreover, they and the Southeast Group were also making use of and cooperating with each other. If Zhang Xiaohua went there, the Southeast Group would be able to control the affairs in Huading to a certain extent. At least in this matter, they had the possibility of being roped in. For the Prince Group, there was no doubt that Zhang Xiaohua was now close to them and could be regarded as half of their own people. If they couldn't compete with their own people, it was the best choice to support Zhang Xiaohua. The Southeast Group and the Prince Group supported her at the same time. Zhang Xiaohua was also the former Minister of Supervision of Huading, so he knew Huading very well. Therefore, after a fierce competition, Zhang Xiaohua personally led the team to Huading. And Zhang Xiaohua did not disappoint anyone. Perhaps it was because the evidence in the report was too much and too detailed. On the third day of the task force's arrival in Huading, Qin Hui, the director of Huading, was directly taken away from the meeting of the directors of Huading by the task force. That afternoon, the secretary of Huading Speaker Zhong Yue was also taken away by the task force. The wind and clouds were howling. The major groups in Jianghu state were completely shocked. One after another, the people involved in the case were continuously dragged into it. Different from Liaodong. The whole of Huading had become a battlefield in the shortest time, and all the major groups entered the battlefield. and the first to move was the Southeast Group. The Ministry of Supervision operated at the top. Lu Xiangyang, Ji Wenjiang's confidant, was transferred to Huading as the director of Huading and the Minister of Supervision. And Chu Jiangchao, the former Minister of Supervision, was transferred to Wuyue. Director Yu, the Minister of Supervision. On the third day of this heavyweight appointment, 2 deputy mayors of Huading were transferred to Wuyue. One served as the deputy governor, and the other as the director of the council office. An obscure network began to spread in all directions with Wuyue and Huading as the center, affecting everyone's mind. The new group did not directly participate in this matter, but all the influential forces were supporting the giant group. Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai were also paying attention to Huading. While many people were carefully analyzing the situation in Huading and thinking about how to make a move, Qin Weibai, who had received the news of the personnel transfer, just smiled and said softly, "Wang Xiaoyao is making arrangements. He benefits from both sides and exerts pressure on both sides at the same time. This is a beautiful move." "I don't understand," Li Tianlan said bluntly. Qin Weibai thought for a moment and said with a chuckle, "He should have a tacit understanding with Speaker Bai, or rather, he borrowed Speaker Bai's power. They have never met." But the problem in Liaodong put Ji Wenjiang in a passive position in the Ministry of Supervision. At this time, Wang Xiaoyao can take the initiative to the greatest extent by throwing out the Huading case. Benefits from both sides and puts pressure on both sides. Isn't Wang Xiaoyao afraid that the Prince Group and the Southeast Group will fall out with him? Not to that extent. Besides, they really don't dare to do so now. Qin Weibai smiled. The two sat on the big balcony on the top floor of Emperor Dong's palace castle in the early morning, enjoying the cold wind, leisurely and casual. This time, it is essentially a deal. The Southeast Group wants to touch Wang Qinglei, which can be said to be half true and half false. The so-called true is that they really want to touch him and settle accounts with him. But Wang Qinglei has been operating in Wuyue for so long, and the Southeast Group also knows that it is not easy to touch him. It is just a try. It would be best if they can touch him, but if they can't, they will put pressure on him. This year is very critical for Wang Qinglei. Even if the Southeast Group can't touch him, it will cause a lot of obstacles for him. So Wang Qinglei will definitely feel the pressure. He is in a bad situation now. If he has a choice, he naturally doesn't want to resist the Southeast Group by force. If possible, it is best to cooperate to a certain extent. So Wang Qinglei found Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Xiaoyao has a wide network of contacts in the Southeast Group. Now he has betrayed Mount Dibbing, but he can talk to many people. Even if he can't make them change their positions, it is not difficult to meet them. Moreover, he and Yu Chuanguang have been operating in Huading for many years, and they have a lot of chips in their hands. Wang Xiaoyao should have prepared for such a situation many years ago. That's why he ran Huading and finally transferred Yu Chuanguang out of Huading. All of this was so that when he and Wang Qinglei plotted against Wuyue, they could have enough chips to face the Southeast Group. Is this the case? Li Tianlan asked. This case is not so simple. Qin Weibai said softly, "If I am right, Zhong Yue is finished. No matter how the investigation is done, this case will eventually involve him, the Speaker of Huading and a Member of Parliament. If there is no such certainty, the Southeast Group will not be moved by Wang Xiaoyao's chip. The current situation is very obvious. The Southeast Group is also seeking stability, but if they want to touch Wang Qinglei, they need to go all out, which is inconsistent with their demands. They put pressure on Wang Qinglei. Wang Xiaoyao gave them a chip that can pry Zhong Yue, a member of parliament, and the cooperation this time is successful. With this chip, the Southeast Group can plot against Huading, which is no less important than Wuyue. So they can accept letting go of Wuyue and giving it to Wang Qinglei, because it is something they can no longer take back. It is better to let it go and fight for Huading with all their strength. As for the Prince Group, although Zhong Yue has done a good job over the years, the major groups have put a lot of pressure on Huading. Not to mention turning Huading into the backyard of the Prince Group, Zhong Yue has had very few advantages in Huading over the years. Huading is no worse than Wuyue. From another point of view, Wuyue is no worse than Huading. The senior management of the Prince Group is very eager to turn Wuyue into their back garden, and it is relatively simple. As long as they pull Wang Qinglei into their camp, Wuyue will belong to them. It is just that Wang Qinglei has a solid foundation and wants to go further. Now, there are many people in the Prince Group who support Wang Qinglei, and there are also many people who oppose him. So he can only continue to look for Wang Xiaoyao. Wang Xiaoyao threw out the Huading case at this time and let Zhang Xiaohua take the lead. For the Prince Group, it is to show its value and also to put pressure on the Prince Group. After this incident broke out, the senior management of the Prince Group should soon unify the voices within the group and decide to support Wang Qinglei. In this way, they can not only stabilize Wang Xiaoyao, but also get Wuyue. At the same time, they can use Zhang Xiaohua to leave some forces in Huading. Even if the Southeast Group is dissatisfied with Wang Xiaoyao now, they can do nothing about it. They can't take down Wuyue, so they naturally can't ask Wang Xiaoyao to give Huading to them. What Wang Xiaoyao gave them was an opportunity that they couldn't miss. This opportunity is already in their hands, but Wang Xiaoyao must have more key evidence in his hands, and he will show it step by step. The Southeast Group will establish some advantages in Huading in the face of more and more abundant evidence, which means that the Prince Group will continue to lose, which will also make the Prince Group more reluctant to give up Wuyue. So both sides will meet some of Wang Xiaoyao's requirements. Even if they are dissatisfied with him, it will not affect their decisions. Wang Xiaoyao will transfer his team in Huading to Wuyue bit by bit, and the two groups will give him a certain degree of help. At the end of this game, Zhong Yue will be abandoned and become an abandoned pawn. The two groups will suffer heavy losses, but they will also gain a lot. The Prince Group will give up Huading, which is difficult for them to control, and get Wuyue. The Southeast Group will give up Wuyue, which they can't get back at all, and get Huading. Wang Xiaoyao and Wang Qinglei, who are sandwiched in the middle, can also get what they want. This is the balance. Both of them get something, and neither of them will win or lose. As for the other groups, they will not be willing to let the Crown Prince and the Southeast Group make such a deal. They all have their own designs on Huading, so they will enter one after another. It is a chaotic battle, so the current situation in Huading is very complicated. Li Tianlan listened carefully and thought about it for a long time. Then he said softly, "What's all this nonsense? This is wisdom," Qin Weibai said softly. It is different from standing and fighting. The latter is to kill the enemy to the maximum extent to win, while the former, no matter how you fight, you will not be swayed by emotion. The premise of fighting is what you get and what you can keep. Standing and fighting has the nature of extinction. On this battlefield, the fighting is dazzling, but most of the time, it is actually seeking peace, stability, and balance. I know how to play. I'm an expert. Li Tianlan nodded and then shook his head. I can't afford to play. I don't know how to play. He picked up the cup with a smile and took a sip. Looking at the calm lake in the distance, he asked, "What should we do next?" "Just wait patiently," Qin Weibai said softly. Now the major groups have just made their moves, and the situation is still chaotic. We can't get Huading, and the giant group can't get it either. The giant group can't get it either. They can only get some partial benefits, so it's best to wait and see now. The matter in Liaodong is still involved, and others will not think that we did not enter the battlefield, so there is no possibility of them joining forces against us. When the situation in Huading becomes clearer, we can know what to do. Qin Weibai's red lips gently bit the straw in the cup. But the outcome of Huading, if analyzed in depth, will probably be the outcome of this election. Huading will also be the focus of this election. Huading was the focus of this election. Such a script had actually happened once more than a decade ago. It was also in Huading that time. Before the election, the Southeast Group lost Wuyu. This was the heaviest loss suffered by the Southeast Group after the collapse of the Li family. And this time, it was in Huading again. Qin Weibai's eyes turned, and no one knew what she was thinking. We still have to wait, Li Tianlan shook his head, feeling a little helpless. He was really bored now. Don't worry. Qin Weibai chuckled. Huading is already in chaos. All the major groups have begun to enter the battlefield, and each other's energy is involved. Such a situation is good for us. Li Huaqing should also make up his mind. In 3 days at most, he will definitely take the initiative to talk to you. Why are you so sure? Li Tianlan was a little curious. Because something will happen in Yuzhou. Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan and said softly. Her eyes were full of affection, but behind the affection, there was a touch of sadness. Tianlan, after Li Huaqing talks to you, I will leave. Li Tianlan looked at Qin Weibai calmly and raised his eyebrows. Where are you going? Qin Weibai turned her head and whispered, to the Lin clan, to deal with some things. After all, I am still the patriarch of the Lin clan. Chapter 1252. Li Tianlan's eyes became a little complicated. His mood at this moment could not be described at all. Qin Weibai was going to the Lin clan. Without any warning, Qin Weibai said it calmly. Li Tianlan didn't feel surprised at all. The emotion in his heart seemed to be reluctance, but also disbelief. Everything was a little uncertain. What happened to the Lin clan recently? Li Tianlan asked. There has always been something. It just depends on what I do. Qin Weibai looked at Li Tianlan softly, as if she was trying to remember his appearance. Now the dark world is not calm, and there are some different voices within the Lin clan. Mr. Lin is now in South America. The branch in South America wants to expand. The interests of the Jiang family, the Heroes Club, and even the fantasy world are what they want now. Li Tianlan nodded. Lin Buzheng. A few days ago, he talked to the patriarch of the largest branch of the Lin clan in South America on the phone. He was a very forthright middle-aged man. The deepest impression he gave Li Tianlan was that he was extremely decisive and sincere. Lin Buzheng hoped to get the support of Emperor Dong's palace in America. Strictly speaking, he hoped that Emperor Dong's palace could send troops to America and share America with him. This guy was very ambitious, but he didn't fight at all when he should. He handed over some core information and even core industries of the Jiang family to Li Tianlan without hesitation. Lin Buzheng made it very clear on the phone that he would fully support Emperor Dong's palace's expansion in America. America was now in chaos. After Jiang Qinsong's death, the new invincible realm expert Jiang Guochu had stabilized the situation. But on the night of the final battle in Beihai, Jiang Guochu died on Mount Dibing. Several secret bases of the Jiang family suffered heavy losses under the joint efforts of the Lin clan, the fantasy world, and the Heroes Club. The whole Jiang family was on the verge of collapse. But it was just on the verge of collapse. A lean camel was bigger than a horse. The Jiang family of South America had been operating in America for hundreds of years. Although it had suffered heavy losses, its resistance was still strong. Lin Buzheng was very thoughtful. According to the current situation, it was only a matter of time before he took down the Jiang family. However, he had no intention of taking the Jiang family's interests. He would unconditionally give this part of the interests to Emperor Dong in exchange for the opportunity to form an alliance with Emperor Dong. Lin Buzheng's real target was the Heroes Club and Fantasy World, which were nominally on the same front with the Lin clan. The Heroes Club was also a superpower in South America. Its overall strength was slightly weaker than that of the Jiang family, but not by much. Compared with the Jiang family's extensive involvement, the Heroes Club was relatively singular. Many of the areas they developed overlapped with Lin Buzheng's, so it was convenient to annex them. If they took over the Heroes Club, Lin Buzheng's strength would skyrocket in the shortest time. If they took over the fantasy world, it meant that Emperor Dong's palace and the Lin clan had the ticket to enter North America. The two sides would cooperate. Lin Buzheng would provide manpower, resources, and intelligence, while Emperor Dong's palace would provide high-end combat power and benefits to deter the Dark World. The two sides equally divided everything of the Jiang family of South America and the Heroes Club. Then, they would join forces and march into North America. Swift and decisive. Li Tianlan couldn't refuse the conditions put forward by Lin Buzheng. So a few days ago, the three top assassins, Cool Breeze, Drifting Cloud, and Deep Dream, had taken a group of elites of Emperor Dong's palace to meet with Lin Buzheng. Li Shi was also ready to fly directly from Emperor Dong's palace to South America. Three top assassins with comprehensive combat power that was no less than that of a half-step invincible realm expert, and there was an expert at the peak of the invincible realm behind them. Such a lineup was enough to satisfy Lin Buzheng. Now it's not just Lin Buzheng. Qin Weibai said softly, there are many branches of the Lin clan. Their operating mode has always been like this. The headquarters will not interfere with the decisions of the branches, but the branches must cooperate with the headquarters to a certain extent. The Lin clan is a family, but it can also be said to be an alliance of many families. When the major branches obey the headquarters to a certain extent, they will also provide enormous financial support to the headquarters, allowing the headquarters to produce more branches. The headquarters will also provide the major branches with a top combat force to deter the major branches, as well as coordinate the major branches to advance and retreat together at critical times. The Lin clan seems to be relatively scattered, but it can always guarantee the core interest chain. Their comprehensive strength may be slightly inferior to that of Beihai, but it is more stable. For hundreds of years, there has never been any internal conflict in the Lin clan, because there is no conflict of interest within them at all. No ambitious guy will be interested in the headquarters that stands aloof from the world. They all take the money and go out to spread their own branches. Now Lin Buzheng is making a big move in South America, and the other branches are naturally not willing to lag behind. The strongest of the major branches, the European branch, has decided to expand. In addition to these mainstay branches, many small branches also have their own interests. Qin Weibai's eyes flickered. Obviously, she had begun to think about the situation of the Lin clan. After the chaos in Snow Country, there is the final battle in Beihai. The two great chaos changed an era. Now the dark world is empty, and countless forces are leaderless. The Wang family of Beihai is busy stabilizing itself, and the Lin clan naturally wants a share of this situation. Lin Buzheng cooperates with you, and Lin Yuxian is also here. That is to say, two major branches of the Lin clan have a cooperative relationship with you. She looked at Li Tianlan and whispered, do you know what I'm worried about now? The European branch? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. I hope they can take the initiative to cooperate with you. The strength of the European branch is extremely strong. With their help, our expansion in Europe will be smoother. But what I'm most worried about is that they won't cooperate with you. This means that they are very ambitious, and in the process of expansion, they are likely to hurt the interests of Emperor Dong's palace. Do they have the guts? Li Tianlan asked faintly. I'm the patriarch of the Lin clan, and I'm also your woman. Mr. Lin has a very good relationship with you. All this means that you have a deep relationship with the Lin clan. Qin Weibai smiled and said, there is no shortage of smart people in this world. Those people in the European branch may not dare to take the initiative to attack Emperor Dong's palace, but if they don't cooperate with us, they may think that you won't turn against them with the help of the Lin clan and let you suffer some losses. Li Tianlan frowned and shook his head. I really won't, it's just, he narrowed his eyes and didn't go on. It was okay for the European branch to take advantage of him and the Lin clan. But once this precedent was set, no one knew what would happen in the future. I'll take care of it. Qin Weibai smiled and stared deeply at Li Tianlan's face. She said softly, I'll talk to them. If it doesn't work out, I have a countermeasure. At that time, we can announce our breakup. This is equivalent to temporarily cutting off the relationship between the Lin clan and Emperor Dong's palace, and they won't dare to mess around. Announce their breakup? Breakup? Li Tianlan's arms suddenly shook, and he looked up at Qin Weibai quietly. Qin Weibai was also looking at him. Her smile remained the same, but it was somewhat complicated. It's fake. Qin Weibai said softly, when Emperor Dong's palace gains a foothold in Europe, we can get back together at any time. Li Tianlan looked at her quietly. The distance between them was very close, but in fact, it seemed that the distance between them had quietly widened in this morning. Li Tianlan said with a poker face, "Is this your way of dealing with it?" This sounded like a helpless solution, and it could indeed make the Lin clan's European branch have a lot of scruples when they insisted on doing things their own way. But who was Qin Weibai? Li Tianlan never doubted Qin Weibai's means. The whole dark world would not doubt it. As long as Qin Weibai wanted to, she had plenty of ways to persuade the Lin clan's European branch. There was no need to pretend to break up, which seemed to be a helpless move. In other words, if things really came to this point, then their breakup was not a helpless move. Then what was it? Are you angry? Qin Weibai said cautiously, if you don't like this method, you can change it. Li Tianlan was a little upset. He looked at Qin Weibai, bowed his head, and drank some water without saying anything. Qin Weibai also fell silent. Once again, there was a touch of awkwardness between them that had never existed before. Li Tianlan frowned slightly, and his eyes were a little dazed. Since they came back from the lake that day, Li Tianlan had always felt that something was wrong. But Li Tianlan couldn't tell what was wrong with him. The Qin Weibai in front of him was Qin Weibai. Li Tianlan could be sure of this. But this Qin Weibai, for some reason, always had some conflicts with the Qin Weibai in his heart. But in fact, there was no difference between them. Li Tianlan doted on her, loved her, and even relied on her. But when he was with her, this kind of feeling always created a barrier between him and Qin Weibai. This kind of feeling seemed to have always existed, but Li Tianlan didn't notice it at all. It was like this kind of feeling, which should have been natural, was always a little inappropriate for Qin Weibai. Or in other words, it should not be on her. All his feelings should be on another person. But the Qin Weibai in front of him was indeed Qin Weibai. During the days when they were together, no one knew what the other was thinking. Qin Weibai proposed to leave Emperor Dong's palace and even pretended to break up. This made Li Tianlan more and more confused. He didn't know what was going on with these actions, but it always gave Li Tianlan a very bad feeling. Tianlan, Qin Weibai suddenly called out. Li Tianlan looked at her. It's time to talk to Li Guangtu. Qin Weibai lowered her head and whispered, you haven't talked to him since you caught him, have you? You've been ignoring him. Now it's almost time. Li Huaqing will come to you soon. How to deal with Li Guangtu should be decided. Li Tianlan nodded thoughtfully and suddenly said, what do you suggest? Qin Weibai smiled softly and said, this is the internal affairs of the Li family. I don't know, so you can only make the decision. After a pause, she seemed to hesitate and continued, but I don't like this person. I'll let him go for the time being. Personally, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Li Tianlan took a deep look at her. Both of them knew what it meant to let Li Guangtu go at this time. It didn't mean that Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace would have one more enemy in the future. It meant that as long as Li Guangtu was let go, Li Guangtu would definitely go against Li Tianlan. It also meant Li Guangtu would die. This was Qin Weibai's attitude. Chapter 1253. For everyone in the purgatory of Heaven capital, the so-called cage was in their own headquarters. They could see the sun rising and setting, the blue sky and white clouds, know the changes in the outside world, and feel the wind and clouds, but they were trapped in a small space, unable to do anything but rage. No one could have imagined that their own headquarters would become a prison to trap themselves. In this prison, they were free. They could choose to eat, have all kinds of entertainment, and pay attention to the outside world. But they just couldn't leave the headquarters. Their ambitions, their dreams, their expectations of what to do, what to change, what to get, they could only think about it. They couldn't do anything. Such a ridiculous and fantastical thing had actually happened just like that. the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital became a prison. Li Kuangtu, the dominator of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, was captured by Li Tianlan. The Purgatory of Heaven capital, which still had the foundation of a superpower and seemed to be elite and powerful, lost its right to speak in the dark world in an incredible way. The people in the Purgatory of Heaven capital began to panic and wander. It started before the final battle in Beihai. Until now, it had been more than 2 months. Some people entered the Purgatory of Heaven capital, but no one came out. The atmosphere in the headquarters became more and more weird. All kinds of quarrels and contradictions began to escalate, and the cohesion that they were proud of began to gradually disperse. All of this was because the headquarters had now become a prison that only allowed people to go in and not get out. The headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was not besieged by thousands of troops and horses, not locked by various high-tech weapons, and not forbearance under the general trend. It was a streak of sword energy. It was just a streak of sword energy. It came from the young Dong Huang. For dozens of days, the streak of sword energy had been surrounding the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, never dissipating, never weakening. It was fierce and light, sealing every expert who wanted to leave the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Apart from Li Kuangtu, the only invincible realm expert in the Purgatory of Heaven capital, Daybreak, had stabilized his realm. These days, he had been trying to break the blockade. Daybreak admitted that he was no match for Li Tianlan, but he always felt that he could not even defeat a streak of sword energy. But it turned out that he really couldn't. The first time he entered the domain of sword energy, Daybreak struggled to walk 4 steps in it, and then he was seriously injured. 2 months later, he recovered from his serious injuries and once again faced the sword chi cage. However, he only managed to take 4 steps inside before he was heavily injured again. From the beginning to the present, the sword energy showed no sign of weakening. It was endless. Fire-flaming realm martial artists would die if they touched it. The peak of the thunder-shocking realm martial artists could struggle for a while. As for Daybreak, as an invincible realm martial artist, he only had 4 steps to move. Daybreak was very sure that with his current strength, 4 steps was his limit. The moment he took the 5th step, he would perish in the sword chi. The climate of the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was warm and sunny. The sword energy floated invisibly outside the headquarters, occasionally reflecting a colorful light under the sun. But the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was getting more and more depressed. It was a state of gradually losing hope and becoming numb. Everyone's heart seemed to be falling along with the trend of the fall, constantly degenerating under the general trend. Daybreak stood quietly in front of the gate of the headquarters, looking at the same sunshine inside and outside the headquarters with a blank look. After Li Tianlan's sword energy blocked the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, it became the place where Daybreak stayed most often. The sword energy began to spread to the entire headquarters from this place, like a cage, completely enveloping the headquarters. After that, Li Tianlan never came to the Purgatory of Heaven capital again, but the sword energy he left had never dissipated. What Daybreak had been studying was this sword chi. This sword strike, not to mention its power, was undoubtedly the peak of the dark world. If he could study it thoroughly, his realm could definitely directly rush to the peak of the invincible realm, and the embarrassing situation of the Purgatory of Heaven capital would completely disappear. So day and night, eating and sleeping, most of the time, he was here. He was also here during the period of 2 tests and 2 serious injuries. More than 2 months. The invisible sword energy that ordinary people couldn't see at all had become clear in his eyes. The sword energy was like a dragon, constantly rotating around the headquarters. Wisps of sword energy continued to gather and overlap, but they did not disappear. Instead, they formed an extremely delicate cycle. Daybreak could see this sword energy. But he could only see it. He didn't gain anything from this sword energy. What he could feel was the purity of this sword energy. It was extremely pure. The sword light was restrained, and there was even no sword intent. Maybe there was. But Daybreak couldn't see it at all. What was in front of him was just a pure sword energy that he couldn't see through at all. Daybreak just watched it silently. Time passed. Day after day. His mentality was still stable, but as time went by, his heart inevitably changed a little. It was uncertainty and confusion about the future. After Li Guangtu was taken into Emperor Dong's palace, there was no more news. Daybreak didn't know how Li Guangtu was. The uneasiness and restlessness of the entire purgatory of Heaven capital became more and more intense because of this news. He didn't know if Li Guangtu could walk out of Emperor Dong's palace, or if they could walk out of the purgatory of Heaven capital. He didn't know when the pure sword energy in front of him would disappear. Maybe it would disappear one day. But how long would that be? 1 year, 2 years, or even longer? If the overall situation of Zhongzhou state and the dark world was settled, what was the point of them going out? Could they really go out? When everything was settled, maybe this sword light would become a real killing sword. Once the constantly circling sword energy shrank inward, no one in the entire purgatory of Heaven capital could stop it. It shrank in all directions from the ground to thousands of meters in the air. All the people in the purgatory of Heaven capital, all the buildings, all the flowers and plants, and even every grain of dust, would be completely shattered by this sword energy. There would be no trace of their existence. In the blink of an eye, everything would be gone. Under this sword energy. Under such a prospect. Daybreak really didn't know what to do. Bewilderment and powerlessness repeatedly attacked his heart, almost breaking his reason. Light footsteps sounded from behind him. The confusion in Daybreak's eyes quickly disappeared, and he slowly turned around. Dawn walked over slowly with a lunchbox in his hand. He also held a bottle of Wuxia Xianxia in his hand. "Do you want to drink some?" Dawn asked. "Forget it." Daybreak took the lunchbox and shook his head. "I'm not in the mood." In the lunchbox, there was steamed rice with fragrant grains, 6 dishes, and 1 cold dish. There were 3 meat dishes and 2 vegetables, which looked, smelled, and looked good. The amount was enough. Daybreak ate silently with the dishes in his hand. The rice tastes different this time. The top-grade fragrant rice next door. Dawn paused and said self-deprecatingly, "It was sent by Emperor Dong's palace." The corner of Daybreak's mouth twitched. The next door naturally referred to the neighboring country. Its top-grade fragrant rice was world-famous. The price was not expensive for the purgatory of Heaven capital, but it was several times that of ordinary rice. Even if the purgatory of Heaven capital was not short of money, it would not be so extravagant in this regard. It was estimated that only Emperor Dong's palace, which had too much money to spend, could do such a thing. Although they were trapped here, their daily meals were actually good. They couldn't go out, but they could enter. There would always be some people outside the purgatory of Heaven capital, and their existence was enough to ensure logistics. Li Tianlan didn't know whether he didn't know or he didn't think much about it. On the 3rd day after he left the purgatory of Heaven capital, a group of logistics teams came to Emperor Dong's palace. They were well prepared with all kinds of daily necessities, toothbrushes, toothpaste, rice, shower gel, and shampoo, and all of them were the best brands. The rice now was sent by Emperor Dong's palace. "What's this?" Daybreak smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Yeah, what's this?" Dawn murmured to himself. He had heard these words from many people. Li Tianlan blocked the purgatory of Heaven capital, and his attitude was clear but unclear. At least until now, Li Tianlan might fight with Li Guangtu to the death, but he really didn't regard the purgatory of Heaven capital as an enemy. There were too many veterans who were loyal to the Li family here, and too many elites who were in a dilemma between Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu. The 2 generations of heirs of the Li family might be hostile, but between Emperor Dong's palace and the purgatory of Heaven capital, there was bound to be endless and chaotic fetters. Li Tianlan locked them up, but he never killed anyone from the purgatory of Heaven capital. He couldn't kill them because they were not enemies. He trapped them because he didn't want them to become enemies of Emperor Dong's palace. The batches of logistic supplies and food sent by Emperor Dong's palace all represented Li Tianlan's sincerity. How did the people of the Purgatory of Heaven capital feel when they ate the rice sent by Emperor Dong's palace and received the daily necessities sent by Emperor Dong's palace? Top fragrant rice that could be exchanged for dozens of caddies of ordinary rice, toothpaste and toothbrushes imported from abroad, a large number of Jianghu state's top cigarettes and wine, Zhonghua Suyan, Maotai, and Wulianya, were moved over, and even the towels and bath towels were King Hermes. What was this? Was it taunting, showing off, or swaggering? None of them. Every veteran of the Li family knew it was none of them. It was not taunting them for making a wrong choice or showing off that Emperor Dong's palace was as rich as a country. Everyone, including Dawn and Daybreak, knew it. None of them. This was the promise of that child. The child that many of them knew, the child that many of them had watched grow up, the child who used to live in a shabby camp on the border of Jianghu state, the child who had no enough to eat, no tobacco, no wine, no vegetables, and was miserable but always wanted to make the Li family rise again. He said that he would let the people of the Li family live the best life. They were from the Li family. There were people from the Li family in the Purgatory of Heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace. These large batches of almost ostentatious and extravagant materials entered the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. They were all Li Tianlan's promises. They stood on Li Guangtu's side. Some of them were no longer Li Tianlan's elders or friends, nor were they Li Tianlan's enemies. But in Li Tianlan's eyes, they were all from the Li family. It was not indecisiveness or anything else. As long as they were from the Li family, in Li Tianlan's heart, they deserved to be forgiven. Daybreak and Dawn both fell silent. The two squatted at the gate of the Purgatory of Heaven capital and finished the food in front of them in silence. Dawn packed up his things, sat on the ground without a care for his image, and handed Daybreak a special supply Jianghu state cigarette. Do you want to try the cigar? It's the top product in America. I tried it. It's not bad, but I'm not used to it. Dawn asked. Daybreak shook his head, lit the cigarette, and gave a wry smile. Now we're a little messy internally. Dawn whispered, Hua Zhang has been very angry recently. Yesterday, he almost fought with Tongming. Just now when I got the food, I talked back to him, and we parted on bad terms. When he spoke, his voice was very calm, but there was a touch of melancholy in his eyes that couldn't be concealed. In terms of blood relationship, Li Huazhang was Li Guangtu's cousin. Li Tianlan had been calling him uncle since he was a child. About 10 years ago, he went to East Island to join the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Compared with some veterans, Li Huazhang was one of the few surviving members of the Li family after the collapse. He was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm and was now the backbone of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. However, Li Huazhang and Li Guangtu didn't have a good relationship. He had been supporting Li Tianlan before. Although he was here, he was thinking about Emperor Dong's palace. Recently, Li Huazhang had been getting angrier and angrier, and he even directly fought with people some time ago. It's not just Huazhang who is getting angrier and angrier, right? Daybreak smiled. The corner of Dawn's mouth moved. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought, and finally kept silent. Of course, it was not just Li Huazhang. There were many. They used to fight side by side with them, laugh and scold, and they could block knives for each other and even die for each other. Now, there was a sense that they couldn't make plans with each other if they had different goals. There were many people in the Purgatory of Heaven capital who supported Li Tianlan. Daybreak, Dawn, and Li Guangtu knew this, but there was no way to solve it. The relationship between the Purgatory of Heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace was complicated. It was impossible to make it clear. These people stayed in the Purgatory of Heaven capital now. Some wanted to fight for it and didn't want the Li family to split. Some wanted to draw more people to Li Tianlan's side. Some were in a dilemma and didn't want Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu to turn against each other. There were many reasons. After Li Tianlan appeared in the Purgatory of Heaven capital and blocked it, these people were the calmest and even the happiest. But during this time, these people were also the angriest. Not just them. Dawn and daybreak could clearly feel that even some people who had been close to them and even stood in Li Guangtu's camp now had subtle changes in their attitudes. They gradually alienated them and became more and more indifferent to them. Why? Because of the outside world. The people here couldn't go out, but the news from the outside world could come in. When the news that Jiang Shangyu, Gu Xingyun, and Li Guangtu joined hands to besiege Li Tianlan came, the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was in an uproar. If daybreak hadn't suppressed it, the Purgatory of Heaven capital might have been divided that day. Li Guangtu. Because of Li Guangtu, the Li family had completely declined. That was Gu Xingyun's conspiracy and the desperate counterattack of the Wang family of Beihai. No one blamed him. Gu Xingyun. It was him who made the Li family what it was now. How many people in the Li family hated Gu Xingyun? But now, Li Guangtu and Gu Xingyun actually joined hands to deal with the heir decided by Li Honghe. How absurd it was. Where did such a joint effort put the old people of the Li family? Where did such a joint effort put the old people of the Li family who had suffered over the years? Where did such a joint effort put the old people's hatred who had died over the years? Did such a joint effort mean that after the blockade of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was lifted, they would stand together with Gu Xingyun to deal with Li Tianlan? Li Huazhang, who was usually gentle and calm, scolded Li Guangtu and Daybreak on the spot. He scolded them for being Gu Xingyun's lackeys. This angered some people, but it made more people in Li Guangtu's camp unable to even raise their heads. The internal conflict that was about to break out was suppressed by Daybreak with the power of the invincible realm. But since that day, Daybreak could clearly feel that the people of the Purgatory of Heaven capital had become cold. That night, 3 experts of the Li family who had left the Li family's camp earlier and had chosen to support Li Guangtu for many years found Daybreak. They came straight to the point and said that after the blockade of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was lifted, they would join Emperor Dong's palace. This was not a betrayal. The cooperation between Li Guangtu and Gu Xingyun meant that he gave up the support of the old people of the Li family. Since they gave up, it was natural for them to leave. Li Tianlan still regarded the Purgatory of Heaven capital as a part of the Li family. They also thought of themselves as members of the Li family. This position had been set many years ago. Now the Li family asked the people of the Li family to stand with Gu Xingyun to deal with their own people. They couldn't accept it, and they couldn't do it. This was a betrayal. Big brother, this is really wrong. Daybreak was silent for a long time, and then he said in a low voice. When the final battle in Beihai broke out, the Purgatory of Heaven capital had made a detailed battle plan. At that time, their main goal was to recapture East Island. But no matter how that plan developed, it could not involve the matter of joining hands with Gu Xingyun. No one expected that Li Guangtu would go with Gu Xingyun. He abandoned the obsession that the Li family had held for many years. In a sense, this was a betrayal. This kind of betrayal also made him lose the support of the people. Now we can't see Big Brother, and no one knows what's going on. I don't believe that Big Brother doesn't understand the disadvantages of joining hands with Gu Xingyun. Daybreak said softly, I can understand how Huazhang feels, but at least, we should give Big Brother a chance to explain. Maybe it's because of the benefits, maybe it's because of the prospects, or maybe it's because Emperor Dong's palace is giving you too much pressure. Li Ming said in detail, Jiang Shangyu should be the key. Otherwise, with Big Brother's temperament, he would not join hands with Gu Xingyun, and Gu Xingyun would not join hands with us. Jiang Shangyu is the key. Jiang Shangyu, Li Ming shook his head abruptly and sat on the ground with a gloomy face, not saying anything. Regarding this matter, you also have your own thoughts, right? Daybreak glanced at him and laughed. Dissatisfied? Yes. Dawn was silent for a while, then nodded. Do you hate me? Daybreak continued asking. Dawn nodded, then shook his head. I hate Gu Xingyun. Then what do you think of this? Daybreak asked, looking into Dawn's eyes. Li Ming was in a trance. After a long time, he lit a cigarette, took a deep breath, and said softly, I won't join hands with Gu Xingyun, but I will support my elder brother. That's a good sentence. He didn't let down the Li family or his position. But, do you still have a chance to support him? A calm and indifferent voice sounded abruptly. The sword energy around the purgatory of heaven capital fluctuated slightly for a moment, and then the sword energy that covered the sky shook violently. Li Tianlan's figure appeared directly in the air. He looked down at daybreak and dawn, his eyes calm and condescending. The entire purgatory of heaven capital was completely alarmed in an instant. In the purgatory of heaven capital, experts walked out of their rooms one after another and quickly gathered toward the gate. Everyone looked at Li Tianlan with extremely complicated eyes. The eyes of daybreak and dawn were more complicated. Especially daybreak. He couldn't help but think of the first time he met Li Tianlan in East Island. At that time, if he hadn't taken action, would the current situation be different? But how could he not have taken action? Daybreak looked at him silently. After a long time, he said hoarsely, "What did you do to His Highness?" Li Tianlan glanced at him, then at the crowd gradually gathering in the purgatory of heaven capital, and said blandly, "I killed him." Daybreak's body shook violently, and his face completely changed. "What did you say?" "Li Kuangtu is dead." Li Tianlan said blandly. Chapter 1254. After the bolt from the blue, there was an indescribable silence. Behind daybreak and dawn. At the forefront of the crowd, the beautiful phoenix suddenly shook her body. She seemed to be in disbelief and raised her head. She stared blankly at Li Tianlan standing in the air. Everyone's expression was dead silent. Li Kuangtu. Li Kuangtu, who had been able to suppress the Wang family of Beihai many years ago. Li Kuangtu, whose scheming and personal strength had caused uneasiness in the entire Zhongzhou state. Li Kuangtu, who made everyone believe that he would lead the Li family to the peak. Li Kuangtu, who was teamed up by Kunlun City, the Wang family of Beihai, and even united with foreign forces and labeled as a traitor. Li Kuangtu, who grew up in the Li family, fought side by side with them, went crazy, laughed, and quarreled with them. Li Kuangtu, who cooperated with Gu Xingyun. Was he dead? Indescribable complex emotions swept through everyone's heart like a tsunami. One after another, streaks of blood spread in daybreak's eyes at a speed visible to the naked eye. His eyes instantly turned red. Li Tianlan looked at him silently with a calm expression. No sadness or joy. "I don't believe it." Daybreak gritted his teeth, stared at Li Tianlan, and growled word by word. The commotion in the crowd finally began to spread. People regained their ability to think, and the noise and uproar spread wildly. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said calmly, "The body is still on the way and will be sent here later. How about the funeral? You can do whatever you want. I don't believe you dare to kill him." Daybreak met Li Tianlan's gaze and did not give in at all. There was only madness left in his eyes. "It's just a sword strike. Why don't I dare to kill him? Why can't I kill him?" Li Tianlan said lightly. His voice was flat without any ups and downs, with supercilious casualness, carelessness, and naturalness. Daybreak stood where he was, and his aura kept surging. It was difficult for most people to understand the relationship between Daybreak and Li Kuangtu. He and Dawn were brothers, but they were not brothers. They were two little beggars picked up by Li Kuangtu from outside. Their life views, martial arts strength, character, and attitude were all formed by following Li Kuangtu. They certainly had a strong sense of belonging to the Li family, but this sense of belonging was not as important as Li Kuangtu himself in their hearts. In their hearts, Li Kuangtu was like a father, a teacher, and a big brother. During the heyday of the Li family, the two little beggars picked up by Li Kuangtu were trained as sacred guards of Li Kuangtu. In the war of treason at the border, the two of them followed a large number of elites of the Li family to face the first wave of attacks from various superpowers. After being seriously injured, they barely broke through and planned to join Li Kuangtu, but Li Kuangtu had already moved the battlefield with several invincible realm experts. They were lucky to survive, lurked in East Island after the border war, and became the first two cornerstones of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Then they continued to follow Li Kuangtu and built the current Purgatory of Heaven capital. 42 years old this year. Except for the first few years when Li Kuangtu didn't bring them back to the Li family, he and Daybreak had been with Li Kuangtu all their lives and had never left. Li Kuangtu was at the forefront of the battle. Li Kuangtu was at the back to develop his forces. Whether he showed up or not, Daybreak and Li Ming knew that Li Kuangtu was still there. As long as he was there, the two little beggars he picked up dared to face all challenges. Time went by, year after year. The image of Li Kuangtu kept changing in their hearts, from father and brother to teacher, and gradually became the pillar of their hearts, heaven and earth, the world, and their faith. They were the top generals of the Li family. But first of all, they were still Li Kuangtu's confidants for most of their lives. On that rainy day in Yuzhou that year, the two hungry little beggars took shelter from the rain under the eaves of an exquisite restaurant. They looked enviously and longingly at the food in front of the restaurant's customers, swallowing saliva and shivering. Li Kuangtu was still the same Li Kuangtu. He was the chosen one of the Li family, the hope of the rise of the Li family, the gloomy and vicious young master of the Li family, the first commander of the Border Control Corps of Zhongzhou State, the invincible realm expert of the Li family, the traitor, the god of the Purgatory of Heaven capital, and the loser who was defeated by Li Tianlan and even had to cooperate with Gu Xingyan. What did it matter? In their hearts, Li Kuangtu was still the big brother who walked out of the restaurant on that rainy day, touched their heads, smiled, and said that he would take them to eat delicious food. That year, Li Kuangtu was 19 years old. They were only 6 or 7 years old. That year, the handsome Li Kuangtu was having dinner with his classmates in that restaurant. The two little beggars changed into clean clothes, followed him from the restaurant to the bar, and then to the hotel. When Li Kuangtu walked into the hotel room with the two little girls who could be regarded as campus belles in his school, the young master of the Li family said to them with a smile, "You'll follow me from now on." Many years later, Daybreak and Dawn knew that when they first met, Li Kuangtu was compassionate. Kuangtu did have a compassionate heart, but if it weren't for the poor and kind-hearted young lady that day, Li Kuangtu wouldn't have done that. The two little beggars became props that day. It was because of Li Kuangtu's kindness to them that the beautiful young lady willingly took off her clothes in front of Li Kuangtu with another female classmate in the hotel that night. But what did it matter? They might be props, but they were not abandoned in the end. After that night, they were taken by Li Kuangtu to the Li family's unbelievably luxurious mansion in Yuzhou. They had new identities, new rooms, and new books. Li Kuangtu said that they were his younger brothers. Everyone in the Li family was extremely friendly to them. No one dared to look down on them at school, because they had a brother who often drove a luxury car with all kinds of beautiful girls to and from school. They were no longer props, as if they had really become Li Kuangtu's younger brothers. Later on, they were all masks. At that time, Li Kuangtu was the real Li Kuangtu. He was merciless in training, merciless, charming, surrounded by all kinds of beautiful girls, and had a lot of money in his pocket. He would buy a lot of snacks for them. He would laugh when he took them to eat spicy hot pot. He would be at a loss when he cried. He would be merciless in training. He would take all the responsibility when he got into trouble and yell at others. He would let Daybreak and Dawn step on his shoulders to watch a strange big sister take a bath. He would play glass ball with them for an afternoon without any impatience. He would play video games with them until late at night and then drive out for skewers. He would force them to get drunk and lift the skirt of the girl at the next table. Things changed. Different people had different Li Kuangtu in their hearts. He might feel sorry for everyone, but he really didn't feel sorry for the two little beggars. And now, Li Kuangtu was dead. The world seemed to have ushered in the end. The pillar of faith had completely collapsed. It was just a sword. Why wouldn't he dare? His words were simple, and his tone was calm. There seemed to be a slight sound in the dark. I killed him. Li Kuangtu is dead. The body is still on the way. It will be sent here later. How about the funeral? You can do whatever you want. It was just a sword. Why wouldn't I dare to kill him? Why couldn't I kill him? The clear and distant voice kept echoing in Daybreak's ears. At first, it was broken notes, but as the notes kept combining, Daybreak finally understood what those words meant. His reason was broken little by little in the subtle sound. His soul was twisted and completely collapsed in an irreversible trend. No! A shrill voice sounded from behind. Phoenix, who was staggering, suddenly screamed, and a mouthful of blood sprayed directly from his mouth. Daybreak suddenly looked up. His eyes were already blood-red. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. Without any hesitation or thinking, the sharp and twisted sword light gathered in an instant. Daybreak's figure suddenly rose into the sky, like a meteor. I'll kill you. At the same time as the ferocious roar sounded, the soft sword that had been with him for decades had been pulled out. The swaying blade tightened for a second and then completely collapsed. The shining sword light spread wildly in the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Blood bloomed in the air. He no longer had any concerns or thoughts. Daybreak, who was completely mad, directly burned his vitality at this moment. The sharp sword energy was condensed to the extreme and turned into a giant sword shadow of hundreds of meters. The shadow of the giant sword completely enveloped Li Tianlan. As Daybreak's body rose into the air, the shadow was constantly shrinking. The sword energy was still condensing. The giant sword shadow, which crossed from top to bottom, shrank into countless sword energy long swords. Sharp, gloomy, and pure. Daybreak's eyes were full of madness. Before this sword hurt anyone, he had been seriously injured because of his reckless outburst. The sword shadow and Daybreak rushed over at the same time. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. He raised his palm and pressed it down. It was calm, casual, and light as if it had no power. However, everyone could hear the oppressive and violent sound that suddenly rang out in the air. The sky above the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital was abruptly twisted for a moment. In the thunderous sonic boom, all the sword energy disappeared in an instant. The whole space was shaking violently. The twisted air was shaking wildly in a way visible to the naked eye, and ripple-like ripples appeared in the air. Daybreak's rising body seemed to be hit by a huge force and was directly slapped down at a faster and fiercer speed. Boom! The ground shook violently. The asphalt pavement in front of the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven capital suddenly cracked. Dust flew, and the dense cracks spread in all directions on the ground, all the way to the front of the crowd. Daybreak's whole body was slapped into the ground, covered in blood. He coughed violently. Li Tianlan. Dawn's attack and roar followed Daybreak. The weapon in his hand was also a soft sword. The soft blade trembled slightly, and blue electric arcs lit up one after another. Li Tianlan glanced at him. He stood in the air and didn't even move. The sword energy around him directly pressed down. There was another pit beside Daybreak. The ground made a slight sound in the process of cracking. The two brothers, Daybreak and Daybreak, were lying side by side. In the blink of an eye, the two strongest experts of the Purgatory of Heaven capital were both seriously injured. Li Tianlan landed on the ground. Wu Qing stayed in Emperor Dong's palace. Naturally, he didn't wear the black windbreaker that could be worn even in summer. Dressed in beige casual clothes, he clapped his hands casually, without any dust on his body. He did it casually, as if it were nothing. The entire Purgatory of Heaven capital was dead silent. If the almost extravagant supply of materials in the past 2 months made some people in the Purgatory of Heaven capital understand something, and made others have other ideas, then Li Tianlan's casual action was enough to make them really realize what the number one on the divine list of this era was. Li Tianlan's eyes quickly scanned the crowd. There were many people in the crowd that he was familiar with. Some people he knew. Some people he only had some impressions of. Similarly, there were many people he had never seen before. The elites of the Li family formed the main body of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. But the Purgatory of Heaven capital was also developing, so there would naturally be new blood joining. These people didn't have the entanglement in the hearts of the old people of the Li family. Their loyalty was only to the purgatory of heaven capital, not to the Li family. When daybreak and dawn were slapped down from the air, some of these people subconsciously took a step forward. Among them were some veterans of the Li family, and more of them were new blood who joined the purgatory of heaven capital later. Some people's eyes flickered, and they stood still. No one knew what they were thinking. The people who were most familiar with Li Tianlan all had complicated expressions. They wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. This was a different attitude. To some extent, this also represented the different positions within the purgatory of heaven capital. Li Tianlan suddenly smiled and took 2 steps forward. He looked at a middle-aged man standing in front of the crowd and whispered, "Uncle, long time no see." This was an old man who looked a little weathered, a little weak, and a little old, but still handsome. He stood quietly in the first row of the crowd, surrounded by a dozen middle-aged men and women. Obviously, in the purgatory of heaven capital, this was a man whose status was not too high, but he had considerable influence in the Li family. When Li Tianlan was looking at him, he was also looking at Li Tianlan. Different emotions were surging in his deep eyes. There was relief, nostalgia, trance, anger, helplessness, joy, confusion, and bitterness. Li Huazhang. Li Guangtu's cousin. This was a real member of the Li family. Even in the most glorious time of the Li family, he was one of the core members of the Li family who was valued by Li Honghe. If Li Tianlan had to rank all the people in the purgatory of heaven capital, excluding Li Guangtu, Li Huazhang's importance was definitely in the top 3. Li Huazhang's strength at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm could not be said to be a top expert, but he was the talent that Emperor Dong's palace currently lacked the most. "Tianlan, what do you want to do here?" Looking at his nephew, whom he had not seen for more than a decade, Li Huazhang moved the corner of his mouth and asked in a hoarse voice. His tone was a little difficult, and he was in a trance. The year he left the Li family's camp, Li Tianlan was only in his early teens. At that time, like most people in the Li family, he was overwhelmed by the cruel reality. He was not close to Li Tianlan, nor was he estranged. In that oppressive environment at that time, it was really difficult for anyone to calm down and get along with a child carefreely. Li Huazhang only remembered that when Li Tianlan was a child, he liked to stick to him and ask him to tell stories. At that time, Li Tianlan was even younger, about 5 or 6 years old. 2 years before he left the Li family's camp, Li Tianlan had begun to seriously accept Li Honghe's almost cruel training plan and worked hard to change the Li family's fate. They didn't even have the chance to meet at that time. In any case, Li Huazhang did not expect that the first meeting between uncle and nephew after leaving the Li family's camp would be like this. He killed Li Guangtu. Li Guangtu was dead? Li Huazhang looked at him in a daze, and his eyes were a little dull. "I came to see you," Li Tianlan said slowly. His eyes narrowed slightly. "I also came to see the child." "Child?" Li Huazhang was stunned. The crowd was silent for a moment, and everyone's expressions suddenly changed. Li Tianlan gently raised the corner of his mouth and turned to look at Phoenix, who was standing there in a daze. His voice was soft. "Where is the child?" "You and Li Guangtu's child." Chapter 1255. That child, that child? In the headquarters of the purgatory of heaven capital, uneasiness, hesitation, struggle, and different emotions permeated the crowd. Everything that happened today was too sudden. Everyone in the purgatory of heaven capital was not mentally prepared. They all thought that the problem between the purgatory of heaven capital and Emperor Dong's palace was only between Li Tianlan and Li Guangtu. Both of them were from the Li family. Even if there was a difference in strength, they should not be in such a hurry to kill each other. Li Tianlan's youth became his greatest advantage against the purgatory of heaven capital. He still had too much time to put the already divided Li family back together and make the Li family better, so people thought that he would not use too drastic means. Li Tianlan's sword Qi blocked the purgatory of heaven capital but did not kill anyone. The subsequent supply of materials confirmed this point. They thought that Li Tianlan would be gentle to the Purgatory of Heaven capital, slowly draw it to his side, and try to incorporate the Purgatory of Heaven capital into Emperor Dong's palace. But today, when no one was mentally prepared, Li Tianlan came to the Purgatory of Heaven capital again. Conciliatory? Roping him in? Convince? No. Nothing at all. He directly announced the death of Li Guangtu, which instantly hurt daybreak and dawn. He didn't have much contact with the old people of the Li family and directly asked about the child of Li Guangtu and Phoenix. Li Guangtu had descendants. This was no longer a secret. This child was undoubtedly very special in the hearts of the old people in the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Those loyal to Li Guangtu would regard this child as the young master of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Those who came from the Li family and stood on Li Guangtu's side regarded this child as the future young master of the Li family. For those old people who were in Purgatory of Heaven capital but had their hearts in Li Tianlan, they had mixed feelings about this child. Now hearing the news of Li Guangtu's death and seeing Li Tianlan come directly to ask about the child, almost everyone thought of a word. Cut the weeds and pull up the roots. Many people could no longer remain silent. Li Huazhang was the first to speak. He said in a deep voice, Tianlan, Huawu is Guangtu's flesh and blood. For Li Huazhang, it was another matter whether he recognized the child as the young master or not. But no matter what, the child was indeed the blood of the Li family. This identity alone was worthy of his protection. Li Tianlan was speechless for a while and asked, "What's the child's name?" Huawu, Li Huazhang, Li Huacheng, Li Huawu, this name. Is there really no one who would call it wrong? Regardless of whether someone yelled out the wrong number or not, someone would definitely call the wrong number, right? Right? He takes after his mother. Li Huazhang said in a low voice, Jianghu. Li Tianlan glanced at Phoenix. For the first time, he learned Phoenix's surname. He nodded and said softly, "Where is he?" Li Huazhang raised his head and looked straight into Li Tianlan's eyes. He said calmly, "This is the bloodline of the Li family." Tianlan, are you really going to? I'm just looking. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and smiled. Uncle, do you think I shouldn't see it? Your Highness. May I know in what capacity does your Majesty have come to see young master? A chubby middle-aged man stepped forward and smiled amiably, but his eyes were sharp. Are you Emperor Dong Huang of Emperor Dong's palace? Or a member of the Li family? Li Tianlan was silent for a second and said faintly, I don't understand. Who can translate it for me? Beside the fat man, a woman who looked to be in her early 30s came out and said softly, If your Majesty comes to visit young master as a member of the Li family, we naturally welcome you. But if you come as Emperor Dong Huang, you are the enemy of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Although the Purgatory of Heaven capital is not strong, before we fall, we will certainly have the courage to stand in front of your Majesty. Your Majesty, why don't you have a try? Got it. Li Tianlan said with a smile, Are you forcing me to take a stand? Young master? What young master? Of course, it's the young master of the Li family. The fat man said with a smile, his voice clear and firm. Li Tianlan looked at the fat man quietly. Everyone's eyes were also focused on the fat man. There were always some people whose loyalty was not as strong as Daybreak's performance, but they were equally fearless. I am the patriarch of the Li family, and I have never appointed a young master. Explain, how did this so-called young master of the Li family come about? Li Tianlan looked at the fat man's eyes aggressively. The fat man's face changed, and he said in a deep voice, His Highness Li Guangtu is the only son of Senior Li, and Huawu is the legitimate son of His Highness. Naturally, he is the only heir of the Li family. Your Majesty, am I wrong? Li Tianlan looked at him quietly, and his voice did not fluctuate at all. Li Guangtu is indeed Grandpa's son. But when Grandpa died, he was not the designated heir. Of course, I know. The fat man's voice sounded very respectful. His Highness has never been greedy for the position of patriarch of the Li family. What he wants to control is the purgatory of heaven capital. Before Senior Li died, Your Majesty did temporarily take charge of the Li family, but the Li family belongs to the Li family. Huawu is now the last lineal descendant of the Li family. If the Li family is not handed over to him, who else can it be handed over to? If Senior Li knew Huawu's birth, he would definitely make the same choice. The Purgatory of Heaven capital and Emperor Donghuang's palace. How can the people of the Li family be convinced if they don't hand over such a big foundation to Huawu? If they don't hand over such a big foundation to Huawu, will they always let outsiders take charge? Everyone looked at the fat man in shock. Li Huazhang's face changed. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought, but he did not know what to say. Li Tianlan seemed to be angry and laughed. So you mean that this child named Huawu will not only inherit the Purgatory of Heaven capital in the future, but I will also hand over Emperor Donghuang's palace to him, right? Is that what you mean? That's not what I mean. The fat man said softly, it's that the Li family really needs a reasonable and legal heir, and Huawu is now the only candidate. I believe that Senior Li's spirit in heaven will also agree to let Huawu take charge of the Purgatory of Heaven capital and Emperor Donghuang's palace. Your Majesty's contribution to the Li family is undeniable, and we are also grateful for your contribution to the Li family. We also hope that Your Majesty can make persistent efforts and train Huawu well in the future, so that he can completely take over Emperor Donghuang's palace and Purgatory of Heaven capital. Well, this was not only asking him to hand over all his current family property, but also to do his best to train the person who robbed him of his family property. Li Tianlan suddenly did not know what to say. Glib talk had never been his strength. Ridiculous. In the gloomy low roar, Li Huazhang, who had been silent, could not bear it any more and stood up. Zuoqing, if you don't know the situation of the Li family, don't talk casually. Emperor Donghuang's palace is the foundation of his integration of various resources. Why should Huawu take over? The situation he created can't be taken away with a few words. Moreover, why do you say that Huawu will take over Emperor Donghuang's palace? Tianlan is the heir of the Li family appointed by Senior Li on his deathbed, not the temporary control of the Li family. Emperor Donghuang's palace, the Li family, and the Purgatory of Heaven capital should be his. Even if the Li family has a young master, it should be Tianlan's confirmed candidate. Li Huazhang stared coldly at the fat man who was called Zuoqing, and his voice became colder. Moreover, Zuoqing, you are just a guest of Purgatory of Heaven capital. You are not a guest of the Li family. When is it your turn to intervene in our affairs? You're tuning into the Carefree Valley YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.